Thank you for the introduction, Leslie. I appreciate your service tonight and just for all of you being here. I am April and I am an alcoholic. I'm a real alcoholic, 110% through and through. Um, I couldn't always say that. It had taken me a lot of, trial and error and trying to figure that out, that I am an alcoholic. If you could excuse me for one moment here, I'm going to go ahead and remove my canine in the background that's distracting me. My apologies. So it's interesting when we read how it works, which I have heard 100 gazillion times in the meetings that I've attended to over the years. Um, I must have I've heard it different tonight where it talks about what we used to be like. I guess in my head, I always just wasn't paying attention and I thought what it used to be like. So maybe I'll start there for the first time of what I used to be like, which let's say, put it in a nutshell. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I was a hot mess. That's what it used to be like. I was a whirling dervish. I was full of fear, contrary to what Leslie described about me in the intro. And that's what I lived my life. My foundation was lived on self centered fear, as it talks about in our literature. And so that manifested itself in my life by oh my gosh, the addictive behavior, the way that I showed up in life in relationship. Basically I was on survival mode my whole life. I didn't know that until I got into recovery, until I stopped drinking and until alcohol was out of my body for a significant period of time because my nervous system was shot. I didn't realize that most of my life I had been living that way, just in sort of this chronic state of anxiety and worry and concern and angst. And so when for me, when I'm in that fight or flight mode all the time, in that survival mode, I'm trying to do everything I can to get what I think I need to be okay. And not to go too far back because I really want to bring into recovery here because I absolutely love being in recovery and I love our literature and I just want to share some really great things out of our literature tonight. But for me, alcohol. I mean, okay, if I go way back, if I want to be honest, my first sip of alcohol was probably when I was like very young, like first grade, when my uncle, my godfather, handed me his Bud Light, you know what I mean? And thought it was cute that, us little cousins took sips off the top of the beer cans. But my first conscious experience of drinking was when I was in early high school. And I will never forget showing up at that keg party. First of all, being invited to the party, right? And then showing up and getting that red keg cup and feeling like, this is what it feels like to finally fit in, right? Um, and from honestly from there on, I that's pretty much sums up my drinking career. Is I just that sensation that alcohol, the effects produced by alcohol that it gave me, provided me with the I suppose the relief I was looking for, in this state of anxiety that I lived in, always feeling like I didn't quite fit in, um, getting caught up in what everybody else was doing. And should I be doing that? I just didn't know who I was. So, I drank through most of my high school. And in my senior year, this is so interesting. My senior year, I had one of my teachers come up to me and say to me, April, if you don't pull up your grades, you're not going to graduate. Now, I just want to say, this whole time, I had this idea of who I was. And it was definitely not the person that was not going to graduate high school, right? But that's who I had become. That's who I was when I was drinking, you know? And it talks about in the big book how Bill used high power sedative amongst other things to assist. And so that is part of my story. I have used some high power sedatives and some other medications to assist during that journey. And so I got on some stimulants that helped me to graduate along with drinking, so it kept up my drinking and I was able to succeed in graduating like just enough. And I'd like to say that I, went off to college and, I kind of did the societal timeline, but I did not because of my alcohol use. Actually, after I graduated, I landed in, I tried to pull myself together. I went to a year of college. I couldn't make it out of my car the last semester because I had a hangover and I was, drinking all the time. I had a teacher in my first year of college that second semester that was like, "Oh my God, April, you got to pull up, you got to figure something out. You got to take this class." And it was like a tennis class, like something really silly. But I couldn't show up for the tennis class because I couldn't get out of my car because of my hangovers. And I was just like a mess. So that following year, I landed in numerous hospitals over that particular summer for detox. And then I eventually landed in treatment because I would just land in detox and come out and drink and land in detox and rinse and repeat. And then my family at this point had. I mean, at this point, it's affecting everybody around me. I mean, at this point, my parents, of course, are addressing this. People are confronting me. My friends are concerned. They've reached out to my parents, and off to treatment I go. And from there, it was highly recommended that I make a big life change and continue on with women's sober living, which is what I did. So they shipped me off to sunny South Florida, and I stayed in a women's sober living for a year because halfway through I relapsed. It was one night, but I relapsed. It was really hard for me to concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. And there's this part in the big book that just every time I hear it, and when I came back this time, that was my sobriety date is now November 25th, 2005. This is what stuck out to me. It talks about the idea that somehow someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Oh my God, that I was just like, can I just live? Can I just have fun? Like I was so delusional, of what reality was and what I thought I was just having fun and being a normal person and drinking. So that had been my great obsession. And so I am at this women's sober living house, and eventually I move out from there and I get sober for that. At that point, it was like 3.5 years. It was like I had relapsed at 6 months and then gained 3.5 years. And I relapsed for about a month. And then came back to the program, and I was in the program. At that point, I was like really hitting the streets with going to meetings and all of that. And then after it was St. Patty's Day, I had about 2 years sober, and I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. It was so crazy. This is who I used to be. I was like, I'm first of all, I'm not going to be an alcoholic. I don't want to be an alcoholic, so I'm just not going to be one. And I went out on St. Patty's Day and I went to this bar and I sat down and I ordered myself a drink. And I had gone there a couple of times and I was not drinking. And the bartender even said, "Are you sure about this, April?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I am sure about this." And I called at that point, I was in the program. I called my sponsor. I said, "Thank you for your time, but I won't be needing you anymore." I called my sponsee. I said, "I've decided not to be in the program. You're going to need to find another sponsor." And I was living with someone at the time who was in recovery. And I took all of my AA paraphernalia, big book, coins, the whole 9 yards, and I give them this box. I said, "Hey, can you donate this to the next meeting you go to?" Because I'm not going to be a part of AA. It was so insane. Like that is what alcoholism looks like for me. Even after there's this other part where it talks about on page 24 of the big book, and it says, you know it talks about at a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail, right? I mean, that's me. And then it talks about how the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. It becomes non-existent, and we're unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. I mean, that is my story time and time again. And then, of course, it says the almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. And that was me. I would land at the bar. I was the type that was like, how did I get here again? Oh my God. And then I'd be like, well, F it, I'm here anyway. You know what I mean? Like, let's just do this. Let's get drunk. So I moved from South Florida. At that point, I was in a relapse. I'd been drinking for, I think, probably about a year and a half or so. The timeline's a little hazy for me, but it was about that time. And I moved to North Carolina. I moved to Asheville. I had never visited Asheville, and I just decided to move to Asheville. I knew the person I was moving in with, but I had not come to visit, and I was like, why not? I've got nothing else going on. And I'll tell you, a month later, I was back in AA, and I've been sober since. So that was November 25th, 2005. What started to happen with me towards the end was that drinking alcohol stopped working for me. So I would drink, and I could drink a quite a bit and not feel any effects, like not even a buzz. Or I could drink a pint of beer and feel like completely obliterated. So I was not getting the effects that I was before, and quite frankly, it kinda scared me a little bit, and I really felt like I was, the only way to describe it, like I was slipping in my mind somehow. Like I didn't have a grasp anymore, or like I didn't, like the delusion that I had a grasp of control was completely non-existent at that point, and that was a really scary place for me. I knew a couple of people who lived up here, so, and they were in recovery. And, I would talk to them about what was going on. They said, April, why don't you just come with us to a meeting? And I was like, I hate AA. Like, I'm never going back to AA. I had such a resentment against AA. Totally ruined it. It's like, the head full of AA and a belly full of booze. It just is a total buzzkill. That happened for me. So, um, it was just by the grace, some magical grace, that I agreed to go to this Saturday night meeting in Asheville. It was young people's meeting of AA, and it met at Chun's Cove off of Tunnel Road in Asheville. And I had no intention of surrendering that night or picking up a white chip at all. And all I can tell you is that when I heard everybody share, I couldn't deny that I absolutely related. I couldn't deny that I felt like I was home, like it was like the surrender flag was down, and I was like, okay. And I felt like I was pushed up out of my chair to pick up that white chip when they did the chips. And, and I've been coming to meetings ever since. For me, I got a sponsor after a few weeks, and we started working the steps, and I worked with that sponsor for 5 years. And after 5 years, she said, this is a good time for you to go ahead and work with another sponsor, do the steps again, get a fresh perspective. You're at a different place in your life right now. And that's what I did. But that first sponsor, I needed some good orderly direction, as the acronym is for God, and that really worked for me well in the beginning, because first of all, because I had come to AA before, uh, let's just say I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder and a wall up. And so there needed to be some work done, for me to really kind of work at this time, like I was working with like just a blank canvas, like, can I just drop my ideas of what I think, and my beliefs? Can I just for a moment admit that there are millions of people worldwide who are getting sober, staying sober, and living reasonably happy lives through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs too, just of recovery, the recovery community worldwide. And I I can't argue with that. I mean, that's fact. So I had to start simple this time and say, I can admit and be willing to admit that I don't know. And I started from there. But that sponsor, she was great because she was like, you need to call me every day and check in. This was going to be a part of me building accountability for myself and my recovery every day until you read your fifth step to me. I missed one day and she called me out on it. That's the kind of direction I needed. So that was great. We met every week until I read my fifth step to her. I went over her house. We studied out of the book, and I went to meetings, and that was, my life. It was great too. I got a fairly simple job, and that's what I needed. I needed my life to be this. AA has to be at the center. I'm sure you guys have heard that, whatever you put in front of your recovery, you'll eventually lose. And that had been my experience. Um, so at 5 years, I get a different sponsor and we work the steps again, and I always have stuff I need to work on, and not that I need to psychoanalyze myself consistently, but there's always a little bit of room for improvement because I'm growing and expanding. AA has given me life. It's breathed life back into me, and which is beautiful because I live a wonderful life today. And, good, bad, or indifferent, I get to be a sober woman. And that is a wonderful thing. Me being on this side of the fence is where I belong. It's, lately I've been reflecting and it's like, my active alcoholic, and addictive lifestyle seems like it was somebody else's life. But at the same time, I can recall with sufficient memory today my last drink. And that last drink that I had, I'd been trying to stop on my own. And I remember I didn't want to drink, but I was at some place and they were like, we just brewed up this fresh batch of Asheville brewer beer or whatever. And it was just like I couldn't say no. Like I just didn't have control. Um, so I worked, the steps again, and now I'm doing them again with a different sponsor, which is really cool that you have this opportunity to continuously evolve. Um, I want to read something out of this other book. I don't know if you've all heard the book called Drop the Rock: Removing Character Defects. That's a real doozy. It's like this for me. It talks about in here that this is an ongoing process. The program is asking us to go where none of us have ever been before, into the lives of lessened fear, diminished anger, fewer resentments, and genuine self esteem instead of self pity. There is a price, however: willingness to challenge and change patterns of thought, speech, and behavior that may have gone unchallenged for 10, 20, 30 years or more. And this is where I'm at currently in my recovery. So, um, I feel like I've done a good bit of work here, but I still have anxiety, after all this time. I still have fear. Over the past couple of years, I've almost felt like I've become a little ultra sensitive to everything around me. So it's like, this is where I get to utilize the steps, where I get to do steps 1, 2, and 3, where on a daily basis, I can say, okay, I'm going to need some help here. Like I start my day out every day saying, I'm not quite sure how to do this. I mean, I pray to the God of my understanding, so I'm just praying out there. I'm like, great spirit, universe. Well, I start calling in everybody because I'm like, whatever, I just need all the help I can get. So I use all kinds of titles for God, if you will. And I ask for help, like I need help with this. Please help me to stay sober, number one. Number two, please help me in all of my thoughts. I'm asking for help with my thinking and my perceptions. Help me through my emotions and feelings that will come up today. Help me in all the words that I say, everything that I do throughout the day and who I interact with. Guide me in that, help me with that, because I don't I don't know how to do this. I feel like the longer we're around, like I just the less I know. And I guess that's not a bad thing. So um the other thing that has been vital for my recovery, and this is a great tool, is the fourth and fifth step with my inventory work, because this is where I'm really able to get into the patterns that I need to change. the hitches that I have to ideas and beliefs that are not working. My ego tells me that they do. My ego really likes to say, this is how it is. This is how you should be. This is how I am. This is how the world should run. Um, so I'm humbled by the fact that when I do inventory work with my sponsor, I can see my part in things. And that's what's for me, that was vital. My first fourth step inventory work that I did, it wasn't perfect, but my sponsor said, just get it, you get it done. We're going to get some of this done, because don't worry, girl, you got the 10th step to do a daily inventory. So I got it done. My second fifth step that I did was way way longer. I did this more like intensive, thorough, big book step study thingamajig, and so I went a little bit deeper. But the point is that I'm just getting this inventory work done so I can see these patterns in my life that have been holding me back. It's the cause of my suffering. This like chronic attachment to everything, my codependent behavior with other people. Ugh, you know what I mean? That's what I'm working on now, how to have healthy relationships and boundaries with people. A lot of growing up here in recovery. Step 6 and 7 for me, as I said, reading Drop the Rock now, I haven't read it all this time. And someone's like, oh my God, you got to read this book, and it's just like really for me about like letting go and letting God. I had this old sponsor in Florida who used to say, simple, quick prayers, empty me of me and fill me with thee. And I'm like, yes, please, just a quick, you know, throughout the day, just repeating that mantra of, oh, I can see this. Like lately I've got this, it's weird, I don't consider myself a person who um embodies like the defect of envy, but I've been feeling that lately in this like crazy weird sense, like envy. And so I get to turn around and ask God to remove that character defect, remove my fears, remove any defects of character, and direct my attention to the woman that you would have me be today. So for me with envy, my practice is to do gratitude, right? The gratitude list, these, really practical tools that I learned in the beginning. The God box, having a box where I can write my stuff that's bothering me and stick it in that God box and ask God to take it from me. Um, and speaking of God too, my relationship with my understanding of a higher power is pretty simple. They talk about in the big book, like God either is or isn't. I'm not a religious person, although I was raised Roman Catholic, but nowadays I get to have this very roomy, all-inclusive ebb and flow over time. I get to say, I'd like to practice Buddhism one day to be like, hey, this thing over here looks pretty cool too. That's all spiritual. I'm going to bring that into the picture. So it gets to be whatever I want. And I will tell you, there are some days where I'm like, I don't think there's anything around, where there's days where I feel so disconnected that I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But as it says in the big book, when I look up at a really clear, starry night, I can't help but just say, yeah, there's something out there for sure, So, my higher power is huge. My second sponsor I work with, she said, my goal is to take you through this big book so you will have a closer relationship with a higher power of your understanding, who is going to carry you through life. So she really taught me to have this relationship, tend to it daily. Um, I'm a little bit of a book nerd, so I love to read books and all kinds of, spiritual stuff out there, different ideas of God and, what that might look like. And, she's helped me to really learn to entrust myself. I can walk through life now really um, learning to listen to my own intuition. I could never do that before. I never, because my mind is what brought me here to Alcoholics Anonymous. My disease lays in the center of my mind. So that's why I'm constantly needing to have a daily reprieve. And that's completely contingent upon what I do each 24 hours. So if I start my day with a meditation reader, little prayer meditation sesh, asking for help before I launch, don't get me wrong, I do this and I get my car. And then it's like I never did anything. So please, I just want to let you know, like my humanness is like top notch. But the opportunity to be carried through these steps, and for me, getting into steps 8 and 9 with my sponsor, I was a little nervous about that because, quite frankly, I don't like confrontation, and I really do not like having to approach someone and say, "You remember that time that I borrowed your car and I was wasted and I didn't read," like that kind of, remember that time I stole your liquor out of your cabinet when you were on vacation? Remember that time you were looking for the $100 bill? I kind of stole it. Like that idea of doing that was like heart. Oh my God, talk about anxiety. I was like, my heart is in my throat, thinking about it. But again, with the help of my recovery network, sharing at it in meetings, my sponsor is going to walk me through that before I call anybody to even ask permission if I can make an amends to that person. So, there's a real, it's, that whole saying, like, it takes a village. Like, we are all that village to one another. There's not one piece of this that I've ever done by myself. I've had some really cool immense experiences, and then I've had some immense experiences where some individuals said I'd prefer no further contact. And I got to be honest, I was totally okay with that because I didn't want to talk to them to begin with. So, it all works out. And then, steps 10, 11, and 12, 10 daily reprieve. I get to, do daily inventory. I love to write. So for me, I like to, it's right out of the big book. All this is like cookbook instructions. I get to review my day and see where I did well, which is just as important. That's the other thing. This whole process of doing the steps is not about like, oh, look at all the character defects and just all the ways that you didn't do well in life. No, this is actually, it's like gardening. We're going to weed out the stuff that needs to be weeded out so we can make room. For me, I love gardening and I love that analogy. So that way I can make room for the sunlight of the spirit, that sun to come through and grow me into the woman that I know that I am today, which is this wonderful, sober woman, that I get to move through this life with this blueprint, which, by the way, I'm so grateful for. I don't know how other people do. I don't know what other people do. I think this is awesome. I think everybody should have the opportunity to go through this. Um, and then for me, step 11 is daily. It's just that conscious contact, like I talked about, with making an effort. And sometimes I feel connected to it and sometimes I don't. And that's okay. And step 12, of course, is that spiritual awakening and carrying the message. And for me, a spiritual awakening, I used to think it was like, I mean, like I was going to see a burning bush, I was going to have like be like struck, enlightened. A spiritual awakening for me is this today. I have been relieved of the obsession and compulsion to drink. There was a time in my life where that's all I wanted to do. Um, I succumbed to that life to the extent where I was really surrendering into that. It was like that movie, what, Leaving Las Vegas, and it's just like constantly that, just like I'm just surrendering to alcohol. I'm just gonna be a drunk until I die. That obsession and compulsion has been completely lifted. And so when life gets tough, which I'll tell you it has, life is still life. I used to think I was going to get sober and then, like, I don't know, I'd be immune or something. And that's really not the case. I'm human. I experience life, and life is a very interesting journey, much better sober, might I say. But, you know, it's been a long time since I've thought about that alcohol would be the solution to my troubles today, or the solution to celebrate something that's good that happened in my life. So for that, I've had the spiritual awakening that now I call my sponsor, or, a good friend in the program to process. I've got a good friend that I'm like, hey, I need to process. And they're like, great, call me in 5, I'm going to talk you off the ledge. You know, the other part of the spiritual awakening for me is the freedom that I have found of loosening my grip to the attachments that I've had most of my life. That's where my suffering truly comes from, is the attachment to my ideas, how I think things should be, the attachment to people, places, and things, you know. I've found real freedom in that. And that has only been through working the steps numerous times. And then, of course, daily working steps, and staying well connected and continuously going to meetings. And I will be honest, I've had ebbs and flows in my recovery over the years. There are times where I've been on top of my game and going to meetings, and, I was like, the treasurer for like 100 years, and being really like active in the program. And then there's other times where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, you know? And I get to do that. And then I get to be like, oh, I got to go back, like I need to be in this because I'm much better of a person when I am in the middle of this with you guys, life is easier to walk hand in hand together than alone. And that's what recovery has looked like for me. Um, there's this paragraph I just want to read, and then I think it's almost 7:15, so I'd like to just, close it out for you guys too, because, this is for you guys. I just thank you so much for all being here and letting me be here. Just to be a part of this, even if it is over Zoom, means so much to me. But there is in the big book, in Bill's story on page 15, it says here, we commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere, have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. And that is just a beautiful description of what our fellowship is and what being a part of recovery is. So I think I'll end it there. I'm so grateful to be here tonight with all of you. I can't think of any other place where I would want to be. So anyway, thanks so much for letting me be here and sharing.